Call the meeting to order. Call the meeting to order. 6:30. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Start first with the roll call. And again, as is our usual process, so Alan, who's done an exceptionally good job this month.
As opposed to other months?
Well, he completed 3 sets of minutes, so that's an exception. 4? 4. I didn't, that's very good. I've only got 3 with me, so I missed something somewhere. So that Alan can record who's here. Joe, if you don't mind starting with you.
Joe Coughlin, Nuclear Matters Committee, Town of Plymouth.
Pine Dubois, appointee of the Speaker of the House of Representatives.
John Flores, responsible town council, the governor's appointee.
Rich Grassi, appointee of the Minority House.
Dave Johnston from, is it Rich? Dave Johnston from Mass DEP on behalf of Secretary Beaton.
Kevin O'Reilly, Town of Plymouth, appointed by the Speaker of the House.
Sean Mullen, Town of Plymouth, appointed by the Minority Leader.
Robert Jones, Health and Human Services, representing Mary Lou Sutters.
Heather Leitner, appointed by the Town of Plymouth.
John Mahoney, elected official, member of the Plymouth Board of Selectmen.
Dave Nichols, appointed by Governor Baker.
John Orenberg at Entergy.
Jack Priest, Massachusetts Department of Public Health.
Joe Lynch, Entergy.
Dan Wolf, appointed by the Senate President.
Thank you, and seeing that we have a quorum, we'll carry on. The first order of business will be to take a look at the 3 sets of minutes. I don't have the 4th with me, so I apologize. The July 18th set of minutes. Does anyone have any comments? Hearing none, does anyone want to make a motion to accept them as submitted?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. The August 15th minutes. Anybody have any questions, edits on the 15th? I actually have a couple. Page 5, line 40, if you have it. If you don't, I'll just make a note of it. I think there's just a couple of typos, Alan. One is I think you meant DOE rather than DOJ, since I didn't think the Department of Justice was involved.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And the other was that, although Mr. Flores stated that he has the heart for it, I think he meant that he has heard 3 recurring topics. So it's a D rather than, but that's all I had. Any others? With those changes, does anyone want to make a motion to accept?
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. The September 19th minutes. Anybody have any comments, corrections, edits? Hearing none, does anybody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Before we get started, because we do have a very full agenda tonight, and we have a number of guests that we
There's
want to...
another one.
Would you like the October one?
One
I haven't read it, but if you guys think it's fine by me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fine by me.
I forget how I follow this up. But the October 24th minutes, any edits, comments? Anybody like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And thank you again, Alan. Yeoman's work this month. And again, we have some guests this evening that we want to make sure we run on time so they have enough time. I just want to make a couple of comments, opening comments. The first is that I hope you all received this letter that we received from Joy Russell, who's joining us this evening. In the spirit of it, Joy, thank you very much for forwarding that. I'm sure that may come up during the meeting. I'm also going to pass out, and we have extra copies for the public. Last night, the Board of Selectmen, pass those in both directions, asked the Vice Chair O'Reilly, myself, and Representative Muratori to give them an update during their weekly meeting of the NDCAP's activities and where we stood. We did that, and today they provided us with a copy, which we have more than enough copies for everybody on the panel, plus the public, of what they voted unanimously on last evening in terms of trying to identify for Holtec and for the Commonwealth What are those things that the town of Plymouth hopes to sit down and negotiate with you on? I think it's a very helpful document in that it does lay out the ground rules of what they would like to talk about. So I would only say, once you get a copy of this, and Selectman Mahoney, we're lucky to have him on the panel, so he can comment on this general sense of where the board was, that the sooner you can get engaged with the town of Plymouth, the better. And the same will be true for the Interagency Working Group. Mr. Selectman, did you want to say anything? John, did you want to say anything?
I don't, yes, I do. You don't have a copy yet. Does Mr. Lampert? Yes, I have one. Do you have two extras that you can give to Dr. Anton?
I think Rich has them.
Yeah.
Rich has a bunch.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know that we're moving, so to Joy and Dr. Anton. Now, you're working through this process where, you know, you're hoping to transition into taking over the facility, I guess, next June sometime. And last night, Mr. Mullen came in with Mr. O'Reilly representing this entity here, NDCAP, and the Board of Selectmen, the local executive board in this community, unanimously endorsed this list. And obviously, we know everything is subject to negotiation, and this is just a starting point. And basically, it covers economic development, public safety, public health, infrastructure, and things of that nature. So, just an introductory point. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, any questions on it, we'll discuss them later on. Let's get right to our presenters. Joy Russell and Dr. Anton are here from Holtec to give us a presentation on the CAS system. You may have already received some trinkets and things, which are always nice and welcome, and toys, Tonka or whatever it is. So please, the floor is yours.
Is that over here? Okay. Please let me know.
Pull it in closer.
Closer, sir. Okay, hopefully this is better, sir.
Can you get a sound check in the back to make sure?
Mr. Chairman, honored members of the panel, thank you very much for allowing us to come here this evening and to have this open dialogue with you about our dry spent fuel storage system, which is in use currently at the Pilgrim Nuclear Station and will continue to be used. First, a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Joy Russell, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Holtec, as well as the Chief Communications Officer for Holtec. By way of background, I'm a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, and just a little point of note, when I was an Army officer, I was the Radiation Safety Officer. A lot of background noise here. Should I move it away?
No, I don't know. Not sure whether it's picking up the wireless mic over there. It will swap.
You have a lot. Oh, thank you, sir.
It's the speaker in the back. Turn that one off. Turn that one off. Thank you.
There you
Boy,
go.
Jack.
And Jack.
Once again, MVP.
No.
Not at all.
Nope.
They heard us either.
Hey, Jack.
Jack, here, take
Here,
this one.
take this one, and Kevin and I will share.
All right, there we go. Additional duties is assigned, right, sir? You know what? It doesn't like that.
I can tell.
No, they probably have to just, touch it down the touch.
Okay. All right, we're gonna try that?
That sounds good.
Okay, all right.
That's better.
So again, Chairman, members of the panel, thank you very much for allowing us to come here. A little bit about my background, in case, I'll just start over. I graduated from the United States Military Academy many years ago, I won't tell you how long ago, with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. And as part of my military duty, I served as the radiation safety officer at Watertown Arsenal, if any of you are familiar with that decommissioning that occurred in the early 90s. So some time ago, but I was stationed there for 2 years. And it was an excellent experience, and I was proud to be a member of the community. I went on to earn my master's degree in nuclear engineering from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. And I've currently been at Holtec for over 21 years. And I started in the design group. An analysis group, the nuclear group. So I'm actually one of the original analysts and designers of the dry spent fuel storage system that's in use at Pilgrim. So I know it quite well. And I've also worked in site services. I've performed site service work at Pilgrim in my 21 years at Holtec. I've been here several times. And I've just progressed through the ranks in the 21 years. I joke that I talk too much, so that's why they put me in business development, and then I must really talk too much, and that's why they put me in charge of communications. But with that, I'd like to allow Stefan to provide some overview.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I also want to thank you for the opportunity here to talk to you. I'm Dr. Stefan Anton. I'm the Vice President of Engineering and Licensing at Holtec International. I'm at Holtec now for 20 years. My technical expertise is in the area of nuclear analysis. So it's actually quite unusual. I actually appreciate talking in front of a group like here. Typically, I'm looking at the computer screen or talking to our engineers. So it's a welcome opportunity to talk to people that will be actually involved in using our systems. Yes, I'm with Holtec now for 20 years, and before I joined Holtec, I was working in Germany, essentially in the same area, in the same industry as a young engineer there. I was part of the design team for the German transport and storage system. I have a PhD, or as they say in German, Doctor of Engineering from the university in Germany, and even there my dissertation was about thermal performance of spent fuel transportation systems. So essentially, I have spent my entire professional life up till now in that area. So, and I give it back to Joy.
I'd also like to point out that we have other members from the Holtec Comprehensive Decommissioning International CDI team. We have Chris Massey, who's our Senior Vice President and Director of Operations. We have Andrea Sturtis, who's the Vice President of Licensing. And we also have Jeremy Perriott, who's the Vice President of Business Development and other titles within the CDI organization. And they're also available for questions. So with that, I would like to just give a little overview. Stefan and I will both be speaking. I will provide overview and general information, and Stefan will be providing more detailed technical information. But the objective of our discussion tonight is to provide additional information and background, specifically on the dry spent fuel storage system that's in use at Pilgrim. So with that, a little bit about Holtec. I know that you've heard this at previous NDCAP's meetings, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I do want to give you some overview of Holtec specifically related to dry spent fuel storage. Our core business at Holtec is the safe, secure storage of spent nuclear fuel. And we have been doing this since the mid-1980s. We're a technical innovation company with environmental protection at our core. The equipment that we engineer, design, license, and deploy, the mission is to protect the environment. And that's been one of our core competencies for many years. Just generally speaking, we're financially stable. All of the research and development that we perform in the company is self-financed. We don't have any outside investors, so the research and development that we perform on our dry storage systems and our other ongoing projects, such as our small modular reactor and our facility for used fuel storage in New Mexico, that's all funded by internal research and development money. We have a very robust quality assurance program, an impeccable safety record, And we are committed to the nuclear industry. That is our core, is our commitment to the nuclear industry. And that's evidenced by our recent development along the Camden, New Jersey waterfront, where we had an environmentally challenged area that we transformed into a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility and a state-of-the-art engineering facility as well. We're a vertically integrated company, and what I mean by that is that we have the internal resources, the internal human resources, to take a concept, design it, analyze it, license it with the regulatory authority here in the United States or in the country where it's going to be deployed. We also have the internal resources to deploy that piece of equipment. We manufacture everything that we export predominantly in the United States, we manufacture, and then we also have the ability to deploy it in the field through our site services folks, and we also have construction management folks. Go ahead, Patrick. As I mentioned, as a member of the United States military, you can imagine that I'm very, very proud of my American heritage and proud to have served my country. And in that same facet, I'm very proud of the fact that we're an American company and everything that we manufacture for our dry storage product lines are manufactured right here in the United States. We have 3 factories, one located in Akron, Ohio, near Akron, Ohio, one located in Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, and then, as I mentioned already, the newest one located in Camden, New Jersey. We have 1.4 million square feet of fabrication space located right here in the United States. So the equipment that's deployed at Pilgrim was manufactured here in the United States and then just sent from Pittsburgh up to here. And we actually, everything that we deploy around the world, be it China, South Korea, Taiwan, is manufactured here in the United States, and we ship it overseas. We're the largest exporter of nuclear components in the country. We're very proud of that. Our dry spent fuel storage and transportation systems are well accepted by the industry. I know this map looks like an eye chart. I think it's obligatory that every PowerPoint presentation have one of these dreadful slides. But the point that I want to make here is that our dry spent fuel storage and transportation systems are in use at, or going to be used at, 116 nuclear plants around the globe. There are only 440 nuclear plants, and 116 of those use our spent fuel and transportation systems. We have a very large market share that it gives you an indication of the robustness and the acceptance of our dry storage system. You can see the many countries that this system is deployed in. We have 51 international projects. Every one of those countries has a regulatory authority that reviews and has to approve our system. So not only are our dry storage and transport systems reviewed and approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, they're also reviewed and approved by many agencies around the globe. Little history about our support of Pilgrim. From a dry storage perspective, in 2009, Entergy conducted a very lengthy bid evaluation process of the different dry storage technologies that are available, and they selected the HighStorm 100 system as the most robust technology that should be used at Pilgrim. Today there are 17 HighStorm 100 systems loaded at Pilgrim, and I want to point out, I didn't mention this on the last slide, but I do have it here, there are over 1,200 Holtec systems safely in use around the globe. So this is not a new technology. This is a very mature technology that has been proven over and over again. I just want to point out, and the chairman mentioned this already, that we did submit a letter that signifies our intentions of continuing with the process of moving the dry spent fuel storage facility from the lower pad to the higher pad, and chairman has already mentioned that. So when I speak to groups, I find that there may be misconceptions about what spent fuel is. because the nuclear industry has done ourselves a disservice, quite honestly, by calling it fuel. Because the first thing that comes to your head when you think of fuel is the liquid that you put into your car. Well, I've passed out for you these little cards. And on this card, what I've provided to you is a replica. This is not real. This is a replica of a fuel pellet. Fuel, nuclear fuel, is a ceramic. It's a solid ceramic material. And it does not dissolve in water. It stays as a solid. And on the slide that you can see, first of all, this pellet, it takes about 5 of these pellets to power your home, to power a house for a year. Pretty efficient. This fuel pellet is stacked inside of a metal tube, which the metal is called zircaloy. And that tube is called a fuel rod. It's about 15 feet long. And that fuel rod is then put into a configuration called an assembly. And my dear friends at Entergy have brought along one of the mock-ups. Again, I want to reiterate to you, these are replicas, these are mock-ups. These are not real fuel assemblies, and this is just a replica of a pellet. But I wanted to give you an idea of what it is that we're talking about that we're storing. It's a solid. So these fuel assemblies inside the plant are stored in a pool. It's called a spent fuel storage pool, and it really looks like a pool that you would have in your backyard. They're rectangular, they're 40 feet deep, and you can see it in this particular picture. It's the 4th circle up. You can see a spent fuel assembly or a fuel assembly being lowered into the rack structure that's located down at the bottom. I want to point out that that's all underwater. It might be difficult to see from the photo, but you can see the gentleman up on or woman up on the fuel bridge. After a certain period of time that each assembly stays in the water, it is then capable of being moved to dry fuel storage. And that is what you see in the next frame. In this particular frame, what I'm showing you is just a configuration of what the dry storage system consists of. This is not how it's loaded. This is actually just to show you what the components are. So you can see the spent fuel assembly. Go ahead, hit one more time, Patrick. So the spent fuel assembly is stored in the basket, and that basket is stored inside a canister that we call a multi-purpose canister. And it has a very thick lid, and then the overpack also has a very thick lid. So the canister is stored inside the overpack. So that shows you the components of the dry storage system. The storage system itself is extremely robust, and the purpose of the dry storage system is twofold. The first purpose is to protect the spent nuclear fuel that's stored within it, and the second purpose is to protect the environment and the people that are either in proximity from performing services on the system or to people that are in the general public that are located around the nuclear plant. This picture up on the right shows you what the high storm overpack looks like in the factory. This is located at our factory in Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania. It consists of 2 shells. There's an outer shell and an inner shell. And this space between those 2 shells out in the field is filled with concrete. It's 27 inches thick between here, the inner shell and the outer shell. So we placed 27 inches of concrete in that overpack. In this space that's right here, this is where we store the canister. I'll point on this side so that you can see as well. So this is where the canister is stored. This is in the horizontal configuration because it's laying down at the factory. The picture in the bottom actually shows Holtec site services crews at a nuclear plant placing that concrete in that space. The external surface of the dry storage system, these are the dry storage systems located at Pilgrim, is a metal surface. There's no exposed concrete. And that has a huge benefit because it ensures that there's no degradation of the concrete from any natural phenomena. Also, as I showed you, that concrete is poured at the site. There's no rebar in that concrete. It's purely poured straight into that space. So it's an easy assembly, but also there's no mechanism for cracking. If you look at a sidewalk and you think about a sidewalk that has rebar in it, it tends to crack along that rebar. So by not having rebar, there's no potentials for cracking from the thermal expansion, and there's also no pathways for radiation streaming from cracks within the concrete. It's all encased inside that metal body. There's minimal maintenance required on the dry storage system. It doesn't have any moving parts. It doesn't have any pumps. It doesn't have any motors. That means there's nothing that can break. No motors, no pumps. So it is a purely passive system that has vents at the bottom and at the top to provide the cooling air that goes over the outside of the canister that's stored within it. So it's a completely passive system. It doesn't require any monitoring. You simply have the ability to go out every 24 hours and just check the vents at the bottom for debris. If they have debris, you clear the debris, so 24 hours. It sits there. It's a very passive, robust system. The plant does have processes and procedures that are carried out by personnel to ensure that that cask, which is just sitting there, is properly performing its functions. Those processes and procedures include programs such as the Environmental Monitoring Program, Emergency Planning Program, and so on. So the system is robust and it just sits there. It has no moving parts. But the nuclear plant personnel maintain that and make sure that they're vigilant in monitoring it. Now, continuing on, yes.
Joy.
Yes, sir.
Can we go back to the prior slide?
Sure.
So you pour, there's no rebar,
Correct.
it's 27 inches in diameter, and it's about 20 foot tall?
Correct. It's about 20 feet tall. It's 11 feet in diameter and roughly 18 feet tall.
So you pour the cement, how long does it take the cement to cure? And then from that point, when is the cap put on top, the time lapse?
That's a very good question. What we do is when we pour the concrete, we have a 28-day break test that has to be done at 28 days. It's a 28-day break test. And at that point, the canister can then be placed inside the overpack. So once it's poured, it's 28 days. And then
once
the lid,
so
I'm
once
sorry, go ahead. I didn't answer your second question about the lid. That lid is poured in the factory, so the lid that you see on there, it's also a metal lid. It's a carbon steel lid that has concrete poured in it, but we poured that concrete at the factory because we can ship that. It's not a heavy load. And that lid is actually put on, it can be put on at any time, but it has to be put on when the canister is inside the overpack.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
The dry storage system is licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission under what's called the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, 10 CFR Part 72. There are requirements for the performance of the system from criticality, shielding, thermal, but what I really want to talk about is the structural performance. One of the criteria that the system must we must demonstrate that the system is able to withstand these specific projectiles. These projectiles that you see are quite substantial. The dry storage system must be able to maintain its integrity, meaning no release of radioactive material, under an automobile being launched with a mass of 1,800 kilograms being launched at it at 126 miles an hour. So we have demonstrated that the system is capable of withstanding these specific projectiles. In addition to these projectiles, go ahead, Patrick, the High Storm 100 system has also undergone extensive scrutiny by the nuclear industry as well as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And two examples that I want to address with you this evening are shown on this screen. The first one I want to talk about is the NRC's Atomic Safety and Licensing Board. What this is the NRC's highest level of licensing that is carried out. And this particular licensing activity was carried out on an away-from-reactor facility in Utah called Private Fuel Storage, which is licensed to store 4,000 High Storm 100 systems. It has its license. During that licensing process, 3 independent agencies carried out analysis of the dry spent fuel storage system to demonstrate that taking a direct hit from an F-16 aircraft fully laden with its armament and fuel would not compromise the integrity of the dry storage system. The second example that I'd like to point out is that the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, also conducted an evaluation of the dry storage system post 9/11. In this analysis, the analysis demonstrates that a direct hit from a Boeing 767 aircraft engine at 350 miles per hour also does not jeopardize the dry storage system. There's no release of radioactive material. So when we talk about the robustness of this dry storage system, we mean it. Also of importance is the protection from the radiation that's contained within the system. The radiation dose from the high storm systems at Pilgrim is, once they're all on the ISFSI pad, when all of them have been moved, loaded and moved into dry storage, is anticipated to be less than 5 millirem per year. Well, what does that mean? Less than 5 millirem per year. To give you a point of reference, less than 5 millirem per year, this is the same exposure, 5 millirem, that you would receive from one round-trip flight from New York to Los Angeles and back. That's another point of reference is the average radiation dose to any member of the general public just from existing, this is from all man-made and natural sources, is 620 millirem per year, just to give you an idea. At this point, I'll turn it over to Stefan.
Okay, thanks, Joy. So Joy has focused predominantly on the overall system and on the overpack and on the structural ability of the overpack of the storage system. And I will give a little bit more of details on the canister that's inside that contains the fuel and present a couple of the relevant characteristics of the system. I hope you can hear me. I'm still recovering from some cold, but I hope I'm loud enough. The canister is called an MPC, the multi-purpose canister, and it's a stainless steel system, a stainless steel canister, the sides, the base, the top, it's all made of stainless steel. It's a cylindrical vessel, and it permanently encloses the spent fuel that is in there. It's fully welded. All connections between the different parts, the lid, the base, the side, are welded together. That's an important characteristic of this system. The idea is that you move and transport, that you handle each fuel assembly essentially only once. You put it into this canister, you seal weld it, and after that you just handle the canister. And the multi-purpose is that the canister can be either in a storage system or it can be placed in a transportation system, in a transportation overpack. So it's licensed for both of them. We show here and discuss predominantly the storage overpack, which is the cask around it, as Joy explained, that is ideally designed and designed and manufactured for the storage of the system. In parallel dazu, there is also a transportation system, but we are at this point in time, given the time we have, we can go into that at a different time. Nope, that was a little bit too quick. Thanks. The canister, the important thing, the canister is designed and manufactured to the highest levels of the nuclear standards. It's essentially the same standards that are used to design the internals of the nuclear power plant. Let's go to the next slide. I'm sorry. The principal advantage of the fact that it's an all-welded system is essentially that it is an impregnable barrier against any release of the radioactivity in there. That's the principal idea. That's the most important idea and goal, that we keep the fuel and the radioactivity, the material inside this canister. Essentially, no loaded canister of Holtex or of any of the other manufacturers that exist have ever leaked in long-term storage, has ever leaked any radioactive material out of the canisters. There are, in fact, other systems. There are bolted systems that have been used in the industry. They are not welded systems. They are bolted systems, and they are with respect to leakage. They have a specific challenge because they use seals in there. We don't need any seals. It's all welded. But if you have seals, then you are always in the situation that you have to monitor the seal, and you always have to make sure that the seals are in good condition. And some of these systems that have been used, they have been shown that the seals have been leaked, and they require then extensive maintenance to make sure that they continue to operate properly. So I wanted to
ask a question.
just yep.
What type of monitoring do you have on the container to ensure that you don't have a cracked weld?
There is the manufacturing process of the container takes several steps to make sure that the weld is essentially done in a perfect condition, so that there is no concern of any leakage through the weld. All the welds are radiographed. All the materials initially is tested by ultrasonic methods. All welds after they're made are tested, are radiographed. They're basically, you do the X-rays, which is the standard in the industry to ensure that there is no flaw in any of the welds. Then the final weld that is placed on the top to put the lid on. That is a multi-pass weld. It's about 3/4 of an inch thick. It's done in several parts, and it's inspected in between there. And this is, and then there is also, in addition to that, the helium leak tests that are performed on the system, on the welds as far as possible, and that is accepted by the NRC. That system is accepted by the NRC to guarantee that there is essentially no leakage through any of the materials and to any of the welds of the system. Therefore, there is no specific monitoring required for this. Mr. Chairman.
Let's hold off the questions.
Okay.
Close to the time. How much
Okay.
longer do you think, Doctor, in your part?
Couple of minutes on this, and then there's a short video about something. Okay. I see. Yeah. And we go to the next slide, and that may be what I'll be discussing now. That may be also related to your question. So. Initially, the storage period that was expected for these systems was relatively short, maybe 20, 30 years. However, by now that there is no permanent repository in the US, it is expected that these systems will be used for a longer period of time and house these systems in storage for a longer period of time than initially thought. So the industry, the NRC, together with the industry, are aware and is investigating and researching to make sure that even for a longer period of time, when the systems are used for a more longer period of time, that they maintain their integrity and keep all the fuel and all the radioactivity in these canisters. One thing that has been done with Holtec systems by one of the research institutes is that that some of the canisters, 2 of the canisters actually at Diablo Canyon and at Salem Hope Creek, canisters were inspected on the outside to make sure, basically there were inspections on the outside to make sure that the integrity of the outer surface of the shell of the canister is maintained, and that was done and reviewed, and the conclusion from that was that there is no concern about the integrity of the canisters at this point in time. The NRC has, based on this, on the inspections, based on other research and studies, the NRC has concluded that there are currently no concerns with the integrity of these canisters. Nevertheless, going forward, the NRC has prescribed what is called an aging management process. It has prescribed that all operators that use these kind of systems, that they have to institute an inspection system where the canisters are inspected on a predefined schedule every couple of years to make sure that this continues to be the case into the future, so that there is no problem with the integrity of the canisters, or if there would be any issues would be identified, that there is time enough to actually address the issue and provide remedies to it. This is required by the NRC. As I said, going forward after a certain period of time, this will be instituted at essentially all plants that use canisters. In addition to that, as Joy said initially, we are an innovative company. We always try to improve the systems that we manufacture, and even in our manufacturing process, we have since then implemented changes to make sure that the surface and the manufacturing is as good as absolutely possible. One of the areas where there's a potential for degradation in the outside of the canisters are the welds. So we reduced the number of welds in our manufacturing process, and we changed the welding techniques and did similar things over there.
Let's pull the questions if you.
Okay.
I would like to just point out that the tests that were done at Salem and Diablo Canyon, those are both coastal plants, and they're both identical systems to what's used here at Pilgrim. So they're very reflective of the systems that are used here. So also on the coast, Diablo Canyon, Pacific Ocean, PSE&G, brackish water near the Atlantic Ocean. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Yep. No, thank you. Thank you, Joy. Finally, I'm going from the canister surface to the inside of the canister. This is the basket that is inside, located inside, and to house the fuel assemblies. Each of these squares that you see will be occupied by a single fuel assembly in the end. The basket is made out of a material called Metamic HD. This is a material that has been developed by Holtec over the last a little bit more than 10 years, when it has specific characteristics, ideal characteristics to be used for the basket like this. It has a very high thermal conductivity. It contains neutron poison to control the fuel in there, and it has a very high structural strength, which is important for this kind of fuel baskets. And specifically, the fact that it has a very high thermal conductivity that allows us to transfer all the spent fuel into dry storage within 3 years here at Pilgrim. Maybe at different time at other plants, but for here, it allows us to do that down in a time period of 3 years. And this is just, I mean, I'm already running over time here. I apologize. This is just a brief overview over some of the characteristics of the canister systems, and that we, give that back to Joy.
Certainly.
Joy, is the video going to add any new detail that we haven't heard so far, or is it just more?
Mr. Chairman, the video is actually a video of the loading process, so it would just simply show how the system is loaded at a plant. So would you like?
I am gonna run a little longer because I think many of the members of the panel, and certainly at the end of the evening, will have questions. So let's take the time. You've been kind enough to come up. We have you here. Let's do it.
Very well, thank you very, very much. Mr. Chairman and members of the panel, the video that we're going to show you is the loading of a high-strung 100 system at a BWR plant called Plant Hatch in Georgia. I want to just point out to you that this video, which is approximately 5 minutes long, is a 5-day process, 5 to 6 day process. So it's sped up substantially, so you'll see very rapid movements. So when you see things that look like they're swinging rapidly, please keep in mind that they're moving just millimeters at a time during the actual process. It's unfortunate, but it's the way that it looks. But I think this is a very good way to convey to you exactly how this process works, the number of people, and what the equipment looks like when it's being moved through the nuclear plant. So with that, go ahead, Patrick. So I might give a little commentary. What you're seeing is the multi-purpose canister now being placed into the transfer cask, which is used on site to provide the shielding before it's moved out to the asphyxie pad. So you saw the canister being moved into the transfer cask. So it's now being lowered down into the cask loading pit. That's an actual assembly. Note, this is all being done underwater. Very clear camera. So you can see that that's a fuel assembly being moved into the Metamic HT basket. This particular video was made several years ago, which is why it said the 5 years of cooling. Our licensing process has evolved, and the minimum cooling time is now 3 years. So now you can see the very thick lid being installed, 9.5 inches. Again, this is all underwater. You can see that lid being lowered into place. It's being decontaminated as it comes out of the pool. Now we're putting it into a station where we're going to conduct the draining, where we drain the water out and put the water back into the spent fuel pool. And this welding process, as Stefan mentioned, is a multi-layer weld in a 3/4 inch J-groove weld, and there's multiple non-destructive examinations, NDE examinations that are performed. This welding process and draining process takes 12 hours, and we're showing it to you in about 20 seconds. This is just one of the NDE being done, dipenetrant test. So once the canister is completely drained and then backfilled with helium, which provides the inert gas, we put that secondary closure that you see. That was a secondary closure that covers the ports. Now this is where, I think Mr. Mahoney asked about when the lid goes on. So now we're seeing the cask go into the building. We took the lid off outside. Now this is inside the plant, and that overpack that's going to be used on the storage pad is now brought in, and we need to mate the transfer cask up so that we can transfer the canister into the storage overpack. That's what's taking place here. So the slings now are pulling up on the canister so that we can open the bottom drawer, the door here in the mating device, so that we can allow that canister that you see right there to be lowered into the overpack. So as that comes off, you'll be able to see the canister is now located in the overpack, the storage overpack. And again, now you can see the canisters right here. Right, so there, you can see the canister is inside there, and now we're putting the lid on. Okay, we're almost there. So the transporter, again, remember, as I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention, this cask now fully loaded weighs 350,000 pounds. This is a very large, very heavy object. This transporter, which we have a little model of it over here with wheels on it, this one's a tracked vehicle that they use down at Plant Hatch, is used to move that cask out to the pad. It looks like a big tank, as you can tell. It's very, very large. And it moves at a whopping ½ mile an hour. It takes a substantial amount of time to move a cask from a building out to the pad. At Hatch, it takes 45 minutes to go their distance. Now we're placing the cask into storage, and it's done.
It's the same process that they did here.
Yep, that's exactly, this is the exact same process that we use at Pilgrim.
Do you have any other comments you want to make now?
No, sir, thank you very much for this opportunity.
For everyone here, I apologize, we're going to run longer this evening, so that'll push everybody back a little bit. We're going to allocate at least 15 minutes now for questions from the panel. Mr. Mahoney, I think you had one to begin with.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is all welding done by machines? Is there any human welding from beginning to end?
I think almost most of the welding is done by machines. Yes, there are weld robots that perform these weldings. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Joe?
Heather was first.
Okay. Thank
You talked about the inspection
Yes.
system every few years. What's actually involved with that process?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the question. That the inspection, the purpose of the inspection is to assure that the surface of the canister is inspected, and that you can actually ensure that there are no flaws that are developing on the surface. There are two different methods that can be used. You can either have a robotic system that goes inside the overpack, in between the overpack and the canister, and goes down there to inspect the surface. The other method is that you actually pull out the canister into a cask, and there is a system located there, and while you basically pull the canister through, it will inspect the surface and basically create a map of the entire surface of a canister, and it's a specific technology that would allow to identify surface imperfections there. And such a system has already been developed and has been used by some of our overseas clients.
Thank you. Would you need a spent fuel pool available to make any repairs, and is there a system for that?
Thanks for the question. That is, I mean, I'm actually glad that I should have gone into that, but I'm glad that we can clarify that. Our approach, if there would ever be a surface flaw or anything would be found, would not be an attempt to repair it. We would take the canister and put it just into a larger canister. So it would use the same technology that we have. You pull up the canister, you make a slightly larger canisters. We already make canisters of different sizes. We make a slightly larger canister. We would take the canister out of the system, put it into that larger canister, put a new lid on top of it, weld it again, and have it then back into the storage system, or maybe a similar storage system. It could go back into the same storage system. And we don't expect that you would need you definitely don't need a spent fuel system, spent fuel pool for this. You probably you don't even need a building for this, probably just a location where you outside can operate the welding system in the end that closes the secondary canister.
So the canister would be pulled out of the concrete overpack?
The way it is put, you have seen it. I think that was important to see the video. We put it in there. You would pull it out again into the transfer cask, and then you would put a slightly larger canister inside there, and then you would put it back in there. That is the approach, and it's all existing technology that we already use now. That would be just a slightly modified dimensions to do this.
Have you had to do it up to this point at
No.
any plant?
No,
Okay.
we
Thank
not
you.
have to do that.
Joseph? Question. Because those canisters are so heavy, if and when a interim or permanent storage site becomes available, whether it's yours in New Mexico or somewhere else, are those the canisters that would be actually used for transportation, or would it be disassembled and put in a smaller canister for transport, and then put in a larger one once you get to that storage site?
That's an excellent question. The canister, as Stefan said, is licensed for storage and for transportation. The canister itself weighs about 90,000 pounds fully loaded. And you're exactly right. The canister is then moved from the storage overpack that you see here into the transportation overpack. It's the same canister, no repackaging. The transportation cask as a package weighs around 125,000 tons. When you put the impact limiters on it, it's
125 tons, not 125,000 tons.
100.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefan.
Yep.
And so once you put the impact limiters on it, we can send it either by barge or by rail to the off-site facility.
So all the planning that would go along with the transportation process would have to take, obviously, all that into account prior to moving any of the canisters onto any of the transportation vehicles, if you will.
Yes. But it would be a similar process as you've seen. You have seen the movement of the canister between the storage system and the transfer cask, and it would look very similar that you take it out and then you put it into this transportation cask, and which is designed differently because it has to withstand different events than a storage system. It has impact limiters, and then it would be put in there. It'd be set horizontally, and it one then either on a barge or on a carriage. It would be transported. We just recently delivered 2 of the transportation casks to the Ukraine, and also rail casks have been already built in the Ukraine to perform exactly that function that you just discussed, to perform that over there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask if you could better explain the draining of the cask after it leaves the pool. I mean, is there a requirement that you get it dry to avoid corrosion moving forward, or what?
Oh yes, most certainly. There are requirements by the NRC how dry essentially it has to be. There are 2 methods that can be used. You can use a vacuum drying. So you pump out the water that is in there, and then you set the internal under a vacuum to basically extract all the water that is in there. Second method is to actually flood it with hot gas, with hot helium, to drive all the water out, and then you would just see the helium that comes out of the system has to be absolutely dry. There's a acceptance criteria to make sure that that only probably some traces of water is left in there. Yeah. And only then you close up the system.
Rich?
Thank you.
May I?
Thank you for the presentation. A couple of quick questions. You say you do a visual inspection every 24 hours. Once the storage or the device is on the pad and operational, is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And the system, the heat removal of the system is through natural convection.
Natural
And
convection, right,
Natural
passive.
convection, passive, yeah.
Right.
But you need
So
to
my,
make.
my question is this: you are monitoring, am I correct, heat, radiation, and helium? Anything else?
We're not monitoring helium.
Okay, so you're measuring heat and radiation. Can I ask you, please? Joy, you and I are both in the Army. Would you answer this for me, please? How,
I'll do my best.
on a visual inspection every 24 hours, you're going to determine heat and radiation? How do you do that?
I don't believe they're monitoring for radiation, heat only.
We're not monitoring.
Right.
They're not monitoring radiation. So the other question I have is, and there's two more. What is the reliability of the canister in terms of the life of the canister, of being able to maintain those passive conditions for so long? How long?
So your first question about the monitoring, the
I
radi,
want to get to the monitoring. What's the reliability of the canister?
you want to talk design life? Okay.
Yep, I can.
You want to talk about the design life?
I mean, it's going to be there for a long period of time. How long will you warrant the canister?
You might, I don't know what the
Right,
warranty, what the warranty
right,
issue
the
is.
warranty is a completely different, the warranty is a completely different issue on a contractual term, but
Okay.
the design life of the dry storage
Right.
system is, I think, really what you're speaking
Right.
of. So, I mean, obviously, we stand behind our product. We've engineered it using the severe criteria of each of the materials that are in the dry storage system. So you're
Okay,
probably.
so the last question I have is, and you can go ahead and continue. The last question I have is,
It's 100 years, I mean.
it
our
was,
design lab. Yeah,
was
sorry.
no monitoring a design goal or a design result?
Essentially, that is a design result because it is a passive system. It is inspected when it's the manufacturing is so that it remains leak tight. And there is, of course, as I said, there is inspections of the system along the way. But in principle, the design life that we envision for the system is 100 years, because there's essentially once we make sure that there are no surface imperfection on the system, then there is really no degradation because it does not have any moving parts that could go away or I'm not quite sure what you're looking at.
The next question I have very quickly, Mr. Chairman. The High Storm 100, what's the oldest High Storm 100 out in use today, and where is it?
The oldest is
Let's see, the oldest one.
is either is at
It's either-
Southern or the
Right, it's
yeah.
either it's either at Plant Hatch or at Dresden. They both loaded essentially the same time.
Okay,
And they're from
how old is
2000.
that? 2000.
They're from the year 2000,
thank you.
certainly.
John?
Yeah, I had the exact same question. The theoretical life expectancy of the canister itself, as it is exposed in an environment like Plymouth, Massachusetts, I'm sure you've done the environmental studies, as you do in the other communities, the life expectancy, you're saying theoretically is 100 years?
Yes, that is the principal life expectancy of these systems, given that the appropriate maintenance, of course, is done on there over time, and at the same time, as I said, now that the industry is looking at these longer storages and implementing the aging management that you do, that should assure that the systems are actually can be operated that length of time.
Okay, so it's 100 years theoretical life expectancy, but in terms of real-life experience, you've had 18 years.
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
And, Pine?
Just to go into that a little bit, well, you said as long as it's maintained correctly. What does that mean?
Yeah, maintained correctly is what I said, that you perform all the steps that are required in the aging management. Sorry.
I appreciate that, because I get very dry here, too.
Yeah.
Air.
Yeah, probably, as I try to, the NRC has in the end, when it became clear that the systems would be used much longer, they have defined basically for all the systems that are out there, the NRC has defined what kind of activities have to be performed on the canister and on the overpack and on all safety relevant systems. For the canister, the most important one, as I mentioned before, is to make sure that there's no degradation of the surface. If you find something, then something has to be done.
Can I follow up a little bit? Because this is, the question is, I mean, you've talked a little bit about it's seaside, just like, you know. Pilgrim, okay? So we know that we got a lot of salt in the air.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
So is part of your maintenance hosing it down after the winter, or these storms and stuff like that, or cleaning off the steel? I'm not familiar with your metamic HT or whatever.
Well, the metamic is on the inside. It's inside the stainless steel canister. It would never be exposed to the environment.
That's not the shell that's outside.
That is not the shell that is outside.
What is the shell that's outside?
The shell right on the outside on the system that you see, that is essentially, that is carbon steel, and that is coated. And if you have any imperfections on there, you would basically touch up the paint. But there is no.
Touch up the paint? Is that what you said?
I mean, if you say if we look at the.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if we talk about the total system, I mean, it's probably if I want to show that here, this is the little model of the canister that sits inside here.
Right.
This is made out of stainless steel, and the system here on the outside. This is on the outside, as it's just normal carbon steel, and that is painted. Of course, you would make sure that you don't have any degradation here on the outside.
So you rely on the paint essentially to protect the steel?
Here you rely on the paint to protect the steel, but that is like a 3/4 of an inch carbon steel. There's not necessarily any long-term concern on there. On the inside, that is the more important issue is to protect to make sure that the stainless steel surface on here is protected, and that is done through as I said, through the inspections that will be performed over time, where either you take this canister. This is the important part that contains the radioactive fuel, the radioactive material, where you have to make sure that this stays.
How do you make sure if it's welded closed?
Well, you make sure
So wait a second, can I back up for a minute?
Yeah.
The lid on the outside canister is not welded.
That is correct.
Okay, so you can take off that lid
You can take off
and
that lid,
inspect
and
the inner canister.
you can either go with a remote system, go into the cavity in between here, and that's what we have already done. That has already been done at 2 systems to see what the condition of the surface is. Or you would have a contraption on top here, and you would pull this thing through a ring that allows you to basically map the entire.
Is that part of your, would that be routine, or would that be if you suspected a problem?
That will be routine. That has to be done for a limited number of canisters. I think that the expectation that you have at least one canister that you identify at your plant that you would think is the most susceptible to any degradation based on its conditions, on its content, on its location, on your ISPC. You need to inspect that, and the frequency that has been defined by the NRC that you have to inspect it every 5 years.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of loading it, how do you vent the helium?
Oh, you vent?
Vent the helium, when you said you put helium in there and then you vent the excess?
No, you don't vent the helium stays in there. That's what
The
you want.
helium is gonna stay in the canister?
Yes.
So it's only water that you're expelling?
You're
from
only
the-
expelling water.
And all of that is going to the spent fuel?
That's going back into the spent fuel pool. That's spent fuel pool water. Correct.
And my
Yeah.
final request from you,
Yes.
Joy, you said at the beginning that Holtec's mission is to protect the environment. What do you mean?
The mission to protect the environment is twofold for us. One, when we perform our work and when we design our dry storage systems, protection of the environment and protection of the people is paramount. And protection of the environment comes from the aspect of ensuring that the design of our systems is as Stefan said, it's impregnable. So we cannot lose the integrity of our systems because that's how we protect the environment. We want to make sure that the radiation dose from these systems is as low as possible and that there are no potential for degradation of the systems. That's how we protect the environment. We're also custodians of the environment because we have manufacturing facilities and we look at the carbon footprint from our manufacturing facilities. And I want to point out that the newest facility that we put up is a LEED Platinum certified. The office building is LEED Platinum certified. And that the area that we built the factory on was an abandoned site that had a lot of environmental contaminants in it. It was an old shipyard from the Navy actually was built originally in the late 1800s and was used extensively to build ships during the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. And so first thing we had to do was we had to go in and actually clean up that site. So from the environmental stewardship, we look at not only the dry storage systems that we put out into the environment, we look at how we conduct our business and operations at our manufacturing facilities, and now looking ahead, we're now in the decommissioning world, which is even more important from an environmental custodianship standpoint.
Do you have a life term, just one follow-up, I'm sorry, Sean. Do you have like a life term associated with that, besides the 100 years that you think that these are good for?
A life term for what,
It
ma'am?
seems to me that, I mean, we're talking thousands, if not longer, of years of waste handling, and there's no permanent storage. So how do you do that as Holtec?
Oh, absolutely. That's a very good question, ma'am. I am confident that this country will develop a permanent solution to the spent fuel storage issue. Oh, absolutely.
Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a real quick follow-up on the lifespan. Should we assume, even though none of us will be around, that the same method will occur at the end of the lifespan as if you had to repair it, that you would move it into a slightly larger cask to continue the protection?
Most certainly. I mean, if it would turn out at any time, and it might actually be, the NRC even looks at even longer periods of time, and they then look at that potential just replacement or put the existing systems in larger system if it is actually necessary to store them even longer. Yes.
And how do you determine the end of that lifespan?
The 100 years? Well, we look at all the materials that are involved in there, and what the load and what the thermal requirements of the materials are, and see that we say it will be a minimum of 100 years. It can be longer. I mean, and as you pointed out, we have only practical experience of about 20 years, and so we don't want to go too far out. But the fact that this is a purely passive system and it's just sitting there internally, it has an inert gas. As long as we take care of all the surfaces, it can last for a pretty long time.
Thank you.
Yeah, my roof is passive too, and it's not gonna last 100 years, so, I mean, it does depend on the environment it's in. Just one technical and then a couple of business questions. How long is the material in the container harmful potentially to the public?
The material in the container, the spent fuel,
Yeah.
that would be harmful to the public for even much longer, most certainly. That's why we,
Years or?
yeah, because that's.
So just as a comment, I mean,
Yeah.
if somebody in 1920 had done what we're talking about now, and I was facing in 2 years having to replace it, with no way to pay for replacing it, I mean, is there something built into this to pay for what happens in 100 years? I'm not blaming you, I'm
no.
just throwing it out there as far as responsible stewardship of how we're managing this. So we're putting something that could last for thousands of years into a container that will last for 100, which sounds like forever, but we all know it isn't, right? And it certainly what's in is gonna be a public safety hazard longer than the container around it. And you're not the one to come up with that, but I do think we as a group, if we're gonna be responsible about this, and Pine, this goes to your question, which is really the question you were getting at, what does it mean to be responsible relative to the environment? The next question is a business question. If you're saying this will last 100 years, I'm assuming that the warranty relative to this is a 100-year warranty? What kind of warranty is it?
25.
So is 25 years, 30? I mean, how long is the company prepared to guarantee this?
The warranty that we provide on our dry storage system is between us and our client, is in our contracts with our client.
What is that? What's the time period?
The warranty is in our contract, which is confidential to us and our
So let's assume
client.
that warranty period plus 1 year, whatever that warranty is. Let's say warranty plus 1 year happens and there's an issue, whether it's just a maintenance issue or whether it's actually something more catastrophic. Who's responsible after that year? And is there anybody responsible? Your warranty is run out. That was the contract.
Well, let's understand that a warranty is the time period that we would make any sorts of repairs at no cost to the client. If after, when you have your car warranty runs out, that doesn't mean the manufacturer turns its head on you and Ford's not gonna actually come back and help you. It just means that you have to pay for it.
If the warranty runs out and your contract is with Entergy, then Entergy would actually pay for whatever needs to be done. Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely right. But also look at it from this perspective, that if we are looking, the reason that Holtec is looking at taking on the fuel as part of the decommissioning is because that's our core business. That's what we do.
I understand.
There's-
I don't mean to interrupt, but I gotta be honest with you.
Yeah, sure.
That's not the answer. You got a couple of problems in your answer. Your customer, who you have the contract with to purchase the property, the liability, and the decommissioning trust fund is Entergy. Your customer is sitting all around you. We are the people that are going to have to live with it. So if you're suggesting that we will never find out what the confidential proprietary information between you and who you're buying it from is confidential, and we'll never know how long this contractual warranty period is, that's gonna be a real problem. That is gonna be, because we are the ones that are living with it. So I'm just gonna say that. I mean, I think most of your presentation, and I wanna get to the other stuff. Senator, can I just ask a couple of questions and we'll wrap this up? One real easy one. And one of the things that has concerned me is that there's been I think you guys are the preeminent providers of this in the world. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. But a lot of the answers were soft. We're looking for real specifics, and we got soft answers. So we may come back, with all due respect, and ask you in writing something. One quick question. You said that canister, I guess, which is a typical of the ones on the site now and the new ones, 350,000 pounds?
The canister
Fully
loaded The canister fully loaded is 90,000 pounds. The system fully loaded is 350,000 pounds.
Work with me here.
Yes, sir.
When the canister's sitting on the pad passively, how much does it weigh?
350,000 pounds.
That's what I want to know. So when you were going to transport that to either an interim storage facility or to a permanent facility, are we transferring 350,000 pounds? What are we transferring for weight?
There will be a different cask. There will be the canister, the 90,000-pound canister will be taken out of here,
Yeah,
and then it will go into a different cask.
perhaps horizontally.
Horizontal impact connectors specifically designed for transportation. This is specifically designed for storage, and that will be specifically designed for transportation. And the weight of these systems are around about the 125,000 pounds.
Now you're saying is
125 tons with the impact limiters.
Tons or pounds?
Tons, 125 tons, so 250,000 pounds.
All right,
Maybe
so
300 pounds. So they're a little bit lighter in the end than what we here have in storage.
and how many of those do you think you could put on a barge?
Depends on how big
The barges, I suppose, okay. Then my final question, and we'll get on to that. Joy, you mentioned that the licensing process has evolved. So the 5 years is now 3 years. Explain to me, I understand the licensing process because we've followed the NRC and the licensing for quite some time. Explain to me how the physics of it have evolved. How have we suddenly cut 60% off the time that for 5 years to cool down and be relatively safe? What has evolved in the physics of this versus the licensing?
The physics is the main part of that is the basket material that I've been talking about, which is the Metamic HT, that allows to have hotter assemblies with a higher heat load, shorter cooled assemblies in there, but still maintaining the same temperatures in the system, because the thermal conductivity of this material is so much higher than what was used previously.
So let's just one final follow-up, and then we will move on. Everything I've been able to find in the public domain, it's all over the board about what are the temperatures we're talking. When these assemblies come out of the water, they go into the new material.
Yes.
What's the temperature then?
The temperature limit is 400 degrees Celsius for the fuel.
And what would that be in Fahrenheit here in Plymouth?
What is it? I think it's 775 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah.
And what would have been the difference between before and now for the 2-year period?
Oh, it is still the same limit.
So it's the same limit, it's just a better material.
It's just the same limit, it's just a bit of better material.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, maybe we want to have an opportunity to submit additional
Yeah.
questions for
Yeah, I
writing.
think we
because,
have.
you know,
Yes,
I know not
yes.
every panelist is. But I just have a couple quick ones if you'll
Please,
endeavor
go
that.
ahead.
My understanding is that the NRC certifies these dry cask systems and storage system and transportation systems, and that certification time period right now is only 20 years. Is that accurate?
Well, almost. It's initially it was 20 years, and that is the principal approach. They would not certify anything for 100 years. They certify it for 20 years. They know that will work at that point in time. At the end of the 20 years, as a user, you come in and you want to extend that period. It doesn't mean that it stops there, but it gives the NRC the opportunity to make sure that if anything has changed in the licensing world, in the technical world, that every user of the system basically gets everything up to date. Recently, a number of years ago, it actually has been changed to 40 years. The newer systems, they can initially be licensed for 40 years, and the extension is also for 40 years. So it's basically a stepwise process. It is, I don't know whether the certification of the cars here is also you get basically a 1 year certification for your car, and you need to come back and you have to continue that. And if something needs to be fixed at that point in time, it needs to be fixed. That's kind of always my simple comparison there. It doesn't mean that the system only lasts 20 years. That is basically the increment that the NRC has been using in that area.
Okay, and I also noticed that there's ongoing research I think the NRC is doing with relation to high burnup fuel And I think there is some high burnup fuel that's being used at Plymouth. So
Yes.
did anything that you talked about in your presentation change as a result of handling high burnup fuel in addition to the regular fuel that's
No,
there?
our systems, they are almost all our systems are certified for high burnup fuel. The storage systems, most of the transportation systems, some of them they're lagging a little bit behind because we haven't put it in the system. But there's no problem nowadays to qualify to get certification of any of the storage and transportation systems for high burnup fuel. That was a big concern a number of years ago. That has all pretty much been resolved, and have been working on with this, so it's not really an issue anymore from our perspective.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you for your presentation.
We're really, thank you very much for the presentation, the information. We're running about a half an hour late now, which is, for those of you who've joined us on a regular basis, this is extraordinary. So we do appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
we apologize. It is difficult to jam this all into.
If there are any questions, we can route them through me and I'll send them to you.
That would be good.
So thank you very much. We're going to move on now to the decommissioning update from Joe, I guess you're going to do it? Or who's going to do it?
Good evening, Chairman Mullen and the members of the panel. My name is Andrea Sturtis, and I am the Vice President of Regulatory Programs, including licensing, for Comprehensive Decommissioning International. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the recent NRC submittals that have been made on behalf of Holtec on the Pilgrim docket. I want to first talk and remind you of Comprehensive Decommissioning International, CDI. CDI is a company jointly formed by Holtec and SNC-Lavalin to decommission nuclear power plants. The company is majority owned by Holtec and is staffed by folks like myself who have extensive decommissioning and associated technical experience coming from both the Holtec organization as well as SNC-Lavalin and its subsidiaries. I specifically come from Atkins Energy, who has a large staff that is experienced in the decommissioning of nuclear power plants. I've been in this industry, the nuclear power industry, for 37 years. I have an undergraduate degree from Carnegie Mellon, a BS in electrical engineering, and I have a master's degree from CMU as well in engineering and public policy. And I've spent most of my 37 years, I've had some time in engineering and safety analysis and design, instrumentation, but the majority of my career has been in regulatory affairs. And so I've done regulatory affairs across a broad spectrum of nuclear power plant opportunities, including decommissioning. So tonight, what I want to do is talk to you about the submittals and the ones that have been recently been made and how they fit together, what the intentions are, and what the next steps forward are. Next slide. So on November 16th, we submitted jointly with Entergy a document, a license transfer application. The document was jointly prepared by Holtec and Entergy, and it was submitted, and it contains an application for the direct and indirect transfer of the Pilgrim licenses from Entergy to Holtec. In addition to the license transfer application portions of that submittal, Holtec also included as an enclosure in this document a request for exemption to permit Holtec to use the Pilgrim Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Fund to not only cover the costs of license termination decommissioning, but also spent fuel management and site restoration. This type of exemption is common in decommissioning plants in the U.S., especially where the trust funds, as long as the trust funds are deemed to be large enough to cover not only the license termination costs, but also the site restoration and spent fuel costs. And in fact, Entergy submitted a corresponding safe store decommissioning trust fund exemption request as well. That's my next bullet on the slide, talks about the fact that on November 16th, in addition to the LTA that included HOTEC's exemption request, Entergy made several submittals on that same day. Their submittals are based on a safe store method for decommissioning. Let me just give you just a 2-second kind of definition of safe store. Safe store is a decommissioning method that's been evaluated and approved for use by the NRC for decommissioning plants in the U.S. What safe store means is, following permanent shutdown and permanent defueling, the licensee places the plant in a safe, stable condition, and that safe storage condition is maintained for as long as the licensee deems necessary. And that can be up to 50 years, because the regulation requires that within 60 years following permanent shutdown, that the plant is fully decommissioned and license termination has been obtained. The Entergy submittals are based on Safe Store, and they represent the primary submittals for Pilgrim. That means those are the ones the NRC is going to hold up and review at this point. The HOTEC submittals, the NDT exemption request, as well as a DECON PSDAR revision that was submitted on that day, will only become effective once the NRC approves the license transfer is executed, and the sale closure is completed, transferring Pilgrim from Entergy to HOTEC. As I indicated, on the 16th, we also submitted a revision to the post-shutdown decommissioning activities report, the PSDAR. The HOTEC PSDAR is based on the DECON decommissioning plan. DECON is another decommissioning method that's approved for use in the U.S. by the NRC. DECON is a method where shortly after decommission or permanent shutdown, the licensee chooses to immediately move into prompt decommissioning, which means dismantlement and decontamination of the plant, to permit the removal of all the contaminants to a level that would support license termination or possibly partial license termination. Partial license termination is, or partial site release is where all of the site is released from the license except for the associated with the ISFC. Next slide, please. In summary, before I move on to the content on this slide, I do want to make sure I was very clear, because I know regulatory processes can be very complicated. So the main submittals that were made were a joint license transfer application, a set of Entergy submittals that are required to support and comply with the NRC decommissioning regulations and process. Those are based on SafeStar. And additional HOTEC submittals that are based on DECON method, but will only become effective if the license transfer is approved, executed, and the sale closes. So the license transfer, the DECON PSDAR, as I indicated, reflects HOTEC's prompt DECON plan. And when you look at it, the slide says major differences. I think if you compared the SafeStore PSDAR in detail against the HOTEC DECON PSDAR, you will see some differences. The majority of them are driven from the fact that our schedule is different. Our schedule starts with dismantlement, decontamination activities shortly after the sale closure and license transfer. And our goal for decommissioning the plant and getting it to a position where we can do partial site release, again, that would be release of the site, all of the site except for the property related to the ISFC. Our goal is to do that within 8 years after license transfer and sale closure. In addition, some of the changes you will see are in the cost estimate. And again, some of that is going to be shown in the cash flows, because the cash flows for us on the whole tech decon are up early and in those first 5 to 8 years. In addition, the decommissioning cost estimate that we've put together is based on a bottoms-up. In order to be ready to start decommissioning right after license transfer and sale closure, we have to have a realistic cost estimate that is based on current costs by vendors to do certain functions. We're going to be starting that and completing that shortly after the closure occurs. And so therefore, our methods and our estimates are based on realistic and available data for today, as opposed to a safe store plan, which would be happening possibly 50 years from now. In addition, the CDI organization also has a more efficient program or project management costs. And that is because this is what we do. Our team is an integrated, experienced team that can safely and compliantly decommission plants. And so therefore, we have our experience in that area. We can eliminate complicated oversights that occur when you have multiple organizations doing subtasks under a utility or a licensee's oversight. The last bullet is the most important bullet on this slide. What isn't different? Whether you do it in 2 years, starting in 2 years from now, or a year and a half from now, or whether you do it 50 years from now. Both the Entergy Safe Store plan for decommissioning the plant and the HOTEC plan for decommissioning the plant will result in safe, compliant decommissioning at Pilgrim. Next slide. What happens now? I put together a little bit of a list here of the next steps. The NRC is currently in the process of performing their acceptance review, and when they finish their acceptance review, they will docket the LTA. Typically, that occurs at about 30 to 60 days after the submittal. Once they've docketed the LTA, they will initiate the steps to put the LTA out for public comment. That typically begins within 30 to 60 days after docketing. At this time of the year, because the holidays that just passed and the holidays that are upcoming, these could be a little bit lengthened, but this is typically what the time periods are. In addition, as I said, Entergy's PSDAR is the primary PSDAR, and it is the one that the NRC will post for public comment. And that typically happens about 30 days after submittal. Again, the holidays may have a small impact on that. Then NRC will conduct a local public meeting on Entergy's PSDAR. That's usually about 60 days after the submittal. I want to make sure I emphasize that the PSDAR public comment period is 90 days after the NRC posts it. Lastly, I've put up here that the NRC will then, once it's docketed and once they've gone through these steps, they will start to review in detail the documents that have been submitted and the LTA in particular. And the NRC, if they need additional information beyond what was provided in the submittals, they will issue requests for additional information. It is our intent to be very responsive, open with the NRC, and facilitate resolution of any RAIs that they deem necessary. I failed to mention that in the LTA, we did request, Entergy and HOTEC did request the NRC for approval no later than May 31st, 2019. That would support a transfer of the licenses and a sale closure in the second half of 2019. That is all I have, and I thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you.
Thank you. Chris, do you have any?
No, I'm just here to answer questions tonight. So.
Any questions? Joseph?
Posting that you showed on the slide by the NRC for comment, I assume by that you mean that the publication in the Federal Register?
Both notices will be made in the Federal Register, both the PSDAR as well as the LTA.
And then the time frame for comments starts as of the posting in the Federal Register? In other words, 60-day period, 90-day period, whatever it winds up
Yes,
being?
yes.
And that hasn't happened yet.
No,
No, it has not.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
thank you.
I just want to state for the record that some of us experience sea level rise, and you are completely wrong when you say there is no difference between site cleanup within 8 years and site cleanup within 60 years, because you cannot clean up the site when it is submerged.
Any other questions, comments? Kevin?
Thank you for coming this evening. Oh, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
I did download your submittal, and I noticed on socioeconomics, you said that there would be socioeconomic impacts of decommissioning are neither detectable nor destabilizing, and that mitigation measures are not warranted. Was there any analysis that went into reaching that conclusion?
There was.
And is that available somewhere?
We typically don't share the detailed analysis, but if you have a specific question, I'd be willing to.
Well, I brought this up last
Yeah.
night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, and the
Feel
town,
free to share a
the
little.
town did, looking ahead to the decommissioning, commission a study along with the Old Colony Planning Council in 2015 that I'd be happy to leave with you, that listed quite a few socioeconomic impacts that, as a resident of Plymouth and a business owner in Plymouth, do concern me. Both the direct costs, the direct impacts, and the secondary impacts, which are actually summarized quite nicely on page 2 of the study. Like, don't have to go into all of them, be happy to share them with you, but when you're looking at $77 million in wages and benefits, $60 million in goods and services, $300,000 in charitable giving, $105 million in secondary economic impacts, $30 million in wages from secondary impacts. I think there are some mitigation measures, and if you haven't seen this, I'd like to share it with you, and hope you take that into consideration.
So look, we're happy to take that on board. One comment I would make is clearly under the situation that Andrea has outlined, in Safe Store, I think the economic changes will be more significant because you're effectively leaving the plant in a safe store position with minimal staffing for a period of time. What we are proposing here is to continue with the existing workforce that we'll inherit, with new people who are coming in to do the work in a shorter period of time and maintain a level of economic base associated with that.
Well, just as a follow-up, the submittal from Entergy had the exact same language as yours did. So there's got to be some kind of difference there somewhere. You don't have to give me an explanation now, but I'd sure like one in the future.
Senator?
Yeah, I apologize if dense because of the time of day, or maybe it's my age, but it seems to me the option that we're being presented is either support the transfer of license and get this done in a time frame that we all around this table want it done, or don't support it, in which case Entergy is going to drag this out 60 years. That actually starts, that to me sounds like extortion. And I want to just point this out. There's a third option, which is Entergy could have actually filed a plan for a rapid decommissioning and acted as a contractor, basically subbing out and therefore staying here as a responsible party. So I just want to state the obvious, and it actually, I can be talked off the ledge because maybe I'm missing something, but either Entergy believes that the best outcome is to do this quickly as a responsible corporate citizen, or they don't. If they do, then they should support it without regard to the license transfer. And if they don't, then they should support a 60-year window without regard to the license transfer. So what's happening here is the technical side of it, which is whether we choose Decon or Safe Store, is being driven by the business leverage of trying to get this supported. And, you know, we may lose. I mean, I've been gamed in business before, but I at least think we should put on the table what's happening here. And that's, maybe I'm missing something. I'd love a response to that. But there is something which is better for the community, and there is something which is better relative to the disposition of this plant. And what is better is a technical better, an environmental better, a safety of our citizens better. And that should not be dependent on whether or not the license transfer happens. So I don't know to whom we appeal, and I don't know to whom we make this case, but somebody's got to tell us what's best. Not what's best for Entergy and its shareholders or Holtec or this new joint venture, which I'm really skeptical about, but what's best relative to the outcome. And I'm really wound up about this. I just don't get it. So maybe I missed something. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize.
Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, I'll give you one final one. This will be good because thank you for helping us catch up on time. Once again, the responses are a little soft. That we ask for this one small part of it. Well, how did you arrive at it? What did you do? Well, we don't really talk about that. Let me give you my take on it, and it doesn't represent anybody else's view but mine. I think it sort of reflects a little of the frustration that you may be starting to hear. I think as a general statement, everybody would much prefer this to be wrapped up in 8 years, and in 10 years, we're having picnics down by the water again. The leverage that the senator just alluded to goes in both directions. There is a considerable business opportunity, and your colleague, I guess from Holtec, Pierre, talked about this at his first appearance here, where this is going to be the future of where Holtec's trying to do. They're trying to do the right thing all around. They're trying to do the right thing on Safe Store. They're trying to bring the best partners with SNC Lavalin, who has the experience in it. They're trying to build a business around being in the decommissioning business, because there's 50, 60 more of these coming. There are no appropriations required. There's no bids required. This is between the energy provider and Holtec. This is between CDI and Holtec. There's all LLCs. This is a great business model, particularly if you get the interim storage, which everybody else also wants. So you're dangling all of the good stuff out there, but with none of the assurances for the community. And what I'm suggesting to you, and I would strongly suggest it to our new friends from Holtec, get a hold of the town, get a hold of the state, and I mean tomorrow, and sit down. You get the first pass of what we're looking for. We need assurances. We need financial assurances, and we also need more details on it. You can't just ignore a study that was done that clearly says there's economic mitigation here that needs to be done. You got to come to the table now, because quite frankly, I'll just give you one detail. We have to go to town meeting in April. Town meeting will be in April? Correct. Right? There's local permitting. It's like that old Ike and Tina Turner song. We can do this harder, we can do this easy. I think all of us, if we had received, and we will receive, I'm sure this is just the first pass, the kind of information in detail that we want, the consensus would be formed. It would be wonderful, as you're asking the NRC, to have this panel supported. But unless we get the kind of partnership that could become Holtec and CDI's best reference going forward, as you clean up all of these, decommissioning trust funds around the country, unless we get that consideration now, we're going to be your worst nightmare. And I don't know how else to say it.
So I did want to clarify one thing. So the environmental impact evaluations that were submitted both by Entergy and by Holtec are focused on the activities that are related to decommissioning, not the socioeconomics of those activities, not the socioeconomics of shutting down the plant. So I just wanted to clarify. Now I understand. I do want to look at your study, because I think there's always valuable insights, but our evaluation is based on the impacts of the actual decommissioning work.
Mr. Chairman, I got so wound up, I forgot to ask the question. Can I ask the
fine,
question?
Senator, go ahead.
And I apologize for being wound up. Specifically, why is the license transfer necessary for this to be done in the shorter time frame?
So, I mean, I think if you look at a comparison of the two PSDARs, and you listen to, and I don't want to speak for Entergy because I think they need to speak for themselves, right? But they have a PSDR associated with decommissioning the plant from an operationals perspective that has multiple layers of management chain and approvals and other things that are really focused around how you operate a nuclear plant. We're not a nuclear operator in that respect. We are a project management company with nuclear skills who are able to do the thing a lot more cost effective, we believe, than Entergy can do it. But to do that, we have to have control of the site in order to be to basically manage it cost effectively through the process.
Thank you very much. We're still running a half an hour late, so our next speaker will be Becky Ullman. And Becky, I apologize, we usually run on time, so I think the issues tonight. So Becky Ullman can introduce herself to the panel. She'll be representing the Commonwealth's Interagency Workgroup.
Chairman, can I
Yes.
just ask a quick question
Yeah.
about there? Are these
Materials?
available
Yeah.
already?
The materials?
Yeah.
No, they're not. And that's for you, Joy, and for you, Andrea. If you could make sure that we get copies of the materials so we can post them to the website, we'd appreciate it.
I got that responsibility.
Thank you very much, Joe. And again, Gary, nice to see you again, but Becky, I apologize that we're running late.
Absolutely no problem. My name is Becky Ullman. I'm the Chief of Staff at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and I'm here tonight representing Secretary Matt Beaton. I've asked Gary Moran, Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Environmental Protection, I've got both, he's only got the environment, to join me. He's been a tremendous help in the coordination of the Interagency Working Group. So I received a couple of questions that I thought I would use to frame an initial presentation and then be available for questions. So I'd like to talk about the administration's goal for decommissioning in general, the purpose, makeup, and leadership of the Interagency Working Group, the working group's activities to date, our vision for coordination with this panel, and our coordination to date with the Attorney General's office. Okay. So beginning with the administration's goal for the decommissioning of the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant, our overarching goal is to ensure that decommissioning is performed in a way that protects the safety and interests of the citizens of the Commonwealth by ensuring that, number one, all applicable Commonwealth of Massachusetts health, safety, and environmental regulations are adhered to. Number two, that decommissioning is carried out as required by the NRC and consistent with any agreements made between the Commonwealth and Pilgrim's owner or owners. And number three, that Entergy and its successors have and maintain sufficient funds to complete the decommissioning process. So moving on to the purpose of the work group, including its makeup and leadership to date. The Interagency Workgroup was formed with the objective to coordinate state agency involvement in any matters pertaining to the plant's decommissioning within the respective agencies' jurisdictions and to monitor pre- and post-shutdown decommissioning activities. Major responsibilities and tasks of this work group include assisting in the development of a comprehensive memorandum of understanding between the Commonwealth and Entergy that would transfer to any prospective buyers. Development of a work plan that lays out the necessary regulatory steps the Commonwealth should take during the decommissioning process. Number three, review and provide feedback regarding the proceedings related to Pilgrim at the NRC, including but not limited to providing recommendations on the level of participation in such proceedings. In addition, the Interagency Workgroup has within scope to review and provide comprehensive feedback on the documentation related to the sale of Pilgrim, the NRC proceedings, the PSDARs, and any other issues, and to assist in evaluating the financial ability of any successor entity to Entergy to cover all costs related to the decommissioning process and afterwards, including costs of site restoration, emergency management, and long-term spent fuel management. Finally, the Interagency Working Group will evaluate, assess, and review public comments provided in relation to the Pilgrim decommissioning, including those generated from the NRC public hearings. So that's sort of the scope of the Interagency Working Group. Governor Baker asked Secretary Matt Beaton to lead the Interagency Working Group. He did so mainly based on the fact that most of the nexus between decommissioning and state agency involvement falls under the jurisdiction of Energy and Environmental Affairs. So based on that, he asked the Secretary to lead that. Secretary has asked me to help with coordination and leading of the work group. So I have stepped in. I stay in close coordination with the Secretary and brief him every day on our work. Secretary Beaton does report back up to the governor's office on the ongoing efforts in regular cabinet meetings. The Interagency Work Group is comprised of agencies throughout the administration that will play a role in the decommissioning process. And I think we sent this, Sean, but I'm happy to sort of read through a list of those agencies that are involved.
And that was distributed, Becky. So.
That was, okay, so maybe unnecessary at this point, yeah. I'll do so for the folks. Just so I don't miss anybody. So agencies that are involved are the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, which I represent. Within our secretariat, we also represent the Massachusetts Environmental Protection Act, or the MEPA office, the Office of Coastal Zone Management, the Department of Environmental Protection, the Department of Fish and Game. Within the Department of Fish and Game, the Division of Marine Fisheries, the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, the Department of Public Health, the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, or MEMA, the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development, the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation, as well as the Governor's Office. So those are all the entities that are represented on the Interagency Work Group. And I did not give you acronyms, so I think I could do all of them. So to date, we have relied upon sort of initial representation from each of those agencies on the basis of the fact that with sort of beginning the process, we wanted sort of high-level folks who could speak to sort of a 30,000-foot view of how to coordinate with the agencies. As we start to dig down into the PSDARs and figure out what the specific issues are, we'll rely on those agencies to bring with them their subject matter experts. So we didn't really want to limit membership to a specific individual when in the future we may need representation at a greater depth from each of those agencies. Okay. So moving on to what the work group has been doing to date. We started off, Secretary Beaton had a series of initial meetings with Entergy. The last one also included Holtec. The purpose of those meetings was to begin a relationship and set expectations, identify communication. EEA, with its subject matter experts, also provided some information to Entergy on my list is current flood maps, sea level rise predictions, temperature and precipitation predictions, 2070 flood risk, probability and assumptions, public water sources, and meteorological conditions. And the intent of that was to make sure that the company had all of our best thinking and information on the Pilgrim site. So following those meetings, one of the earlier priorities identified by the Interagency Work Group was the Radiological Cleanup standard. And following a series of meetings, Secretary Beaton asked DPH to lead conversations with both companies about including a radiological cleanup standard that was acceptable to DPH in the PSDAR, so that those conversations have been ongoing. I'll let Jack talk about that if there's any further questions. In terms of other initiatives that the work group has been engaged in, this fall we primarily focused on the procurement of a contractor to assist the Interagency Working Group in coordination related to the PSDAR implementation and preparation of potential MOUs between the Commonwealth and the companies. As anyone who has experience with state procurement knows, this was not a quick process, but we did make it as collaborative as possible and got feedback and input from all of the entities represented in the work group as to what they would like to see in a consultant. So that MOU was drafted, approved, posted. We held a bidder session, and the responses are due on December 5th. We're anticipating a selection of a contractor by the 19th with a contract that begins at the end of the year.
You said MOU, but you meant RFP?
For the contractor, yeah, we issued
Yeah.
an RFP.
I'm sorry, too many acronyms. We issued an RFP for a consultant to help us with the MOU. Understanding that there is now sort of a time gap between the issuance of the PSDARs and the time at which the contractor will be on board, we are very grateful to DEP for the assistance of both Gary and David Johnson to help us bridge the gap in that time period. So we're not waiting for a consultant, we're diving in immediately on the PSDARs. So that brings me to the next activity. We are meeting on Friday with the Interagency Workgroup, who have all received the PSDARs, to take an initial pass at the analysis and the sort of the issue spotting of things that the administration would like to follow up on, including putting them in an MOU. So that work will begin on Friday. So I think that's all I'll say on the activities of the work group to date. I also have some information to share about our coordination with the Attorney General's office, but I will get to that at the end. So next point is on the work group's vision for coordination with this panel. So I think our vision is that we are partners in the identification of priorities to be addressed within the PSDAR that would then translate into an MOU. So I have some suggested next steps, and I'll conclude with that, but I think that is probably our main area of focus, at least from our perspective. In terms of communication with the panel, Dave Johnston has kindly agreed to serve as a reporter for both, given that he is a member of both. And it is our commitment that we will prepare Dave with an update on the interagency work group's activities prior to each meeting. Okay, so moving on to the work group's engagement and coordination with the Attorney General's office. It has ramped up considerably over the past month. We recently committed to holding weekly joint meetings as we analyze the PSDARs and figure out where our shared strategy lies. So that began this week and will continue for the foreseeable future. It's our intent and our plan to present a united position, both the Attorney General's office and the administration, as we move forward. So in closing, wanted to think through sort of what are the immediate next steps for the interagency work group and this panel to work together. And as I mentioned, I think the best area for our collaboration is on the PSDAR. And in light of that, I would appreciate, it sounds like the town of Plymouth has already taken a shot at this, but we would appreciate this panel's analysis of what you find to be the most concerning areas of the PSDAR, including any suggestions for how they should be addressed in an MOU. Understanding that we will be in a negotiating strategy, prioritization would be very helpful as well. And I think we can talk about how to move forward on that. As we dive into the PSDAR, I think we'll have a better sense of the experts that we'll need to inform our plans and our ability to source those experts within state government. I think we will get to a situation in which we might not have those expertise within state government, and when we do reach that point, I would appreciate the panel's input and suggestions on folks we could bring in to help better inform that. So I think that's the end of what I had prepared, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Becky. It's helped very much. Want to open to questions. This time we'll start with the senator and work this way, if you have any questions.
No, just a comment. I mean, I love what I hear. I mean, I don't quote my favorite Republicans that often, but trust and verify. I do think that, I mean, I appreciate the collaborative, the fact that you see it as a collaborative effort with the group, and I really appreciate the fact that you're getting resources engaged early in the process, early relative to your creation, not as early relative to our creation. So, I mean, to me, it's a huge step forward. I think you've engaged the right agencies, yeah. And so, I mean, I think my only expression would be one of gratitude, because I think this just amps up our ability to participate in this. So.
Joe, I mean, it would be unusual if you wanted to.
No, I would just like to thank Chief of Staff Ullman for making the presentation. I was hoping maybe you would have some notes at this time of night. I kind of pieced together a lot of information, so if that could be shared with the chair, much as you did the list of the various agencies, I think that'd be helpful for everybody.
Sorry, notes from what I just said.
Just a high level, the goals and some of the things you talked about, frequency of meetings and some of the priorities, that type of thing.
Yep, I'll share those with Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Jack? Glenn? David? Yes, sir, Mr. Sir.
So, Becky, so how would you, in Matthew Beaton's department, in your department, how would you describe the level of importance that they're putting on the plant closure? Is this one of their top priorities?
Are you asking, does the administration prioritize addressing the PSDARs?
Well, Matthew Beaton has been put in charge of this interagency group, okay? So within the context of his department, okay, is this one of the top priorities?
I would call this top 3 energy priorities.
Great answer. Okay, so the core group, what is the core, how many people are involved in the core group in this this committee or interagency group?
How many people are involved in the interagency group?
Yes.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by core group. The interagency group?
Sure.
Yep, I think I have to.
Yeah, the list of the agencies that you had, I think it would be that number plus we have multiple members from a number of agencies representing different interests. And as Becky mentioned, I think that'll change as we get further into the process as well. I mean, one of the things we heard tonight is from the department, we need to make sure we have appropriate person involved if we get into the dredging evaluations. If barge is a significant part of this, we're going to really take a look at that. So I think the number is, the number of the agencies plus some agencies have multiple people.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, how many of those people have actually toured the facility? Has Matthew Beaton been down there?
I believe he has, yep.
So that's something that I would certainly advise, that if they haven't been down there, they should at least get a hold of Joe and take a 2 to 4 hour tour of that facility.
Sure,
I mean,
that's
that
a
would
great
do
idea.
wonders for them, and I would highly recommend that. And then the last thing specifically, when you're talking about moving forward and hearing critiques about the PSDAR and bringing in consultants, has there been any monetary numbers thrown about with respect to supporting that in the state's budget, especially as you move into, in the next few months, we start talking about fiscal year 20?
So the number identified in the budget, it was in the budget, or? Yeah, it was in the budget. It was $100,000. I think that's a starting point.
Okay.
And as the RFP was drafted to ask respondents to provide us with their cost estimates. And I think we'll review the responses that we receive in terms of the value versus the cost, and then figure out where we go from there.
Okay.
But that wasn't that wasn't the coming year's budget. Right?
And that was 19,
Yeah,
not
that was
20.
19.
There was 100 in there for 19.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it looks like the administration is certainly Obviously, it's going to come in north of that, but they're willing to support something north of that.
Well, there was a couple $100 million surplus, so
It was $1 billion, Dan. I mean, you know, what are we?
we'll see. But
And
I
by
don't
the
think we
way,
need the whole billion.
Dan, you said trust and verify. I think that originally our favorite Republican stole that from a communist, didn't he?
And just,
Late to get into that, but
and I would just point out in terms of, you mentioned the ongoing support, the RFR does have provisions for potentially extending the contractor for additional years. We'd obviously need to look at it at that time.
Has your group had any direct communication with Governor Baker up to this point, and if so, how frequently has that been?
Yeah, we're directed by the governor's office. I probably talk to their office about 4 or 5 times a week on this.
Thank you.
Robert? I'll defer mine till the end. David?
No, I just want to say that I will do my best to keep a good, strong line of communication between this group that I've been a member of since the beginning and the work group that I'm a recent addition to. So I look forward to doing that and making sure that we can work together in a good, strong partnership.
Bob?
I have no questions or comments, thank you.
Richard?
I just have one quick question, and that is the role that Mr. Johnson is going to play. Is that delineated in your instructions or what you were reading, or is it just a general instruction to Mr. Johnson that he will coordinate between the working group there and the panel here? In other words, are there more specific instructions?
I don't, at this time, there's no more specific instructions. I think we're happy to take feedback on how it's going and go from there. I think the idea was that I would, on behalf of the Interagency Working Group, make sure that Dave is prepared with the most recent update before each meeting and has a time to report back to the Interagency Work Group at the most convenient meeting post a panel meeting, so that there's a solid information flow. If there's suggestions on how to strengthen that, happy to take them.
Both are in the same agency, right?
Yeah.
In the same secretariat.
Yeah.
Right, yes. Gary Moran is in DEP.
Oh,
as
that's
am
right,
I.
you're in,
That's right.
okay, sorry, thank you very much.
John?
To be honest, I think that's one of the reasons we felt David would be a good person, because we have been getting pretty detailed feedback after each one of these sessions as well, beyond the minutes that you post. We get it pretty instantaneously from Dave, so thought it made some sense that he can provide it on an ongoing, routine basis, and so that'd be right, he'd be the right person.
John?
Yeah, just curious, everyone that you've mentioned is really being assigned through the executive branch. Is the legislature involved in any way, shape, or form relative to what the executive branch is doing?
The legislative branch is not involved in the interagency work group at this time. I think the intent was to coordinate executive branch actions. We do communicate with Senator DiMacedo quite frequently and would be happy to think about other.
So any of the standing committees that now exist within the legislature, whether it's science and technology or education or any of those other committees, aren't engaged in the process?
In the interagency work group process? No, not at this time.
Fine?
Thank you, and I'm thrilled that you've ramped up so quickly. I think it's great. You did mention that you shared with Entergy the newest information that the state has developed on sea level rise and those kinds of impacts. Can we get that? I know
don't see
that
when
there
that-
have been
yeah.
new computers and all that sort of stuff, but I haven't seen any of that, so I'm just wondering where it might lie and if, you know, there will be an analysis between that and the recent congressional report on climate change relative to the Northeast, which I thought was rather stunning.
Agreed. So the data that we presented was in July, so it predates the recent climate change report. I'm happy to pull those decks and share them.
Yeah, I had heard that CZM was working on some other computer system. I just, you know, whenever that information is available, I'd love to have it.
Joseph?
First, I want to congratulate you and thank you for the work that the executive branch has done to date. On the other hand, I'm a little concerned that this is really the first time we've heard about, in any detail, the extent of what you've been doing, and would hope that from this point forward, with your comment of we want to work together as partners between the working group and the panel, that there is a regular form of communication interaction between the work group and the panel, and whether that's through David or not, I'm not sure, but do you all keep minutes of you mentioned you've had a number of meetings. Do you keep minutes of the meetings, and can those be shared with us? I mean, we keep minutes of our meetings, and certainly they're available to you all. Because in order to work together as partners, we really, really need to know what the work group is doing on a regular basis so that we can be supportive in that process. But if we have to wait a couple of months or something like that to get another briefing on what you've been doing in the interim and a whole series of meetings, that makes it very, very difficult, or would make it very, very difficult, I think, for the panel to be able to work hand in hand with the working group.
So the vision that we've discussed is that we would never go months without back and forth communication, because we're meeting on a very regular basis, you're meeting on a monthly basis, so you would always have an update on our activities for your meeting, and we would get a readout of what you're doing. So that's sort of one channel of communication. The second is on specific projects like the analysis of the PSDARs, in which, you know, I'd like to discuss with Sean how we follow up on that. But obviously we wouldn't wait for a meeting to have a back and forth exchange on that, including, you know, emails or documents or whatever we need to do.
Kevin, did you have anything?
Other than,
Yeah.
thank you. We appreciate
Yeah.
the administration's effort here. We look forward to working with you.
And let me just restate what you've heard from everybody. We couldn't be happier that you're so engaged in it, and it's, I think it gets much larger than this, particularly though there might have been a few warmer moments tonight than others. I think it's great for the folks from Energy, the folks from Holtec, the folks from CDI, to see that the Town Board of Selectmen, the Commonwealth, the panel, we're all aligned. We're all in this together. We're going to speak with one voice. Fortunately, we have you guys as the lead on it. But the best thing we can say to our partners, hopefully, in this process is that you're going to hear in one common voice. And the sooner we get to those substantive conversations, and it's stuff that's local, it's stuff that's statewide, the better for everybody. Because, and the only thing I'd like to remind all of us, because it's not lost on I don't think anyone in the room, about 6 months from now, on May 31st, I think if Joy is still here, that's the date. And, you know, not to be naive, but I would suggest that any negotiating position we have today will dramatically differ if the NRC has already approved the license transfer. So we have this very compressed window. And I think it would be a great thing, again, making the argument for Holtec and CDI and Entergy, for us all to act together, to do the right thing, to create this as the model for all of the rest that'll come behind, because they're all coming, and to work together on it, and to be fair, and to be reasonable. So I can't thank you and the Secretary and Gary, Dave. You guys have been great, and let's go get it.
Great, thank you.
We're going to open it up for 20 minutes now of public questions. Thank you, everybody. We won't be that far behind schedule. For those of you who don't usually attend our meetings, we have a slightly different method for doing this than most. We don't take a number, and there's no lottery. Who would like to speak tonight? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 speakers. Oh, 6? Let's do it again. Make sure everybody gets in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're going to give everybody 3 minutes, and we'll extend it to 21 minutes. And we'll start with you, sir. Thank you. Please come up and introduce yourself, and if necessary, spell your name so we sort of get it right. Yeah, that'll be the easiest. You could actually just either sit right down at the table there and use the microphone so everybody can hear.
Good, thank you. My name is Guntram Mueller, and I'm the co-convener of Boston Downwinders. I was noticing Holtec talked about the missiles, testing of this canister against attack by missiles. But all they had was the weight of the missile and the speed of the missile. There was no mention made of whether it exploded. Now, unfortunately, Holtec is not here anymore, but my question is, was it just a dead weight?
They're right behind you, sir.
Right behind you.
Right to your right.
So the question is, was it just a dead weight or did the missile explode?
I think you want the definition of the missile.
Yeah, I'm not sure there was ever a mention of a missile.
Yeah.
Flew an F-15 and fully loaded with fuel.
These are just dead weight impacts of and these are required by the regulation. They are also, in addition to that, they're of course under security evaluations that have been done by the NRC on other threats.
That's what I
they are
got
not
to think.
discussed in public. I have to deal with them all too.
Are you planning actual missiles?
We don't plan any actual missiles.
That's good.
Right.
Thank you. Next in the second row,
Please don't shoot actual missiles.
Janet, are you next, or who is next? We'll get, I want to give you special time, Jeff.
We got some extra
Janet,
fluoro,
did
too.
you want to talk, who wanted to talk next now? All right, did you,
Second row.
second row?
Yeah.
Did you? Come on up.
down.
Yeah. Just introduce yourself, and the clock is running.
Okay, Diane Turco with Cape Town Windows, and I just want to thank you all for being up here and really working hard for the community. But, you know, I remember one of the first meetings I came to, I think Holtec and Entergy was saying everything was going to be open and transparent, and they lied to you again. And Holtec, you know, you're not too confident of your product if you can't share the warranty, period. Okay, so Holtec, I'm just curious as to, you're moving spent fuel at San Onofre, right? Right? Yeah, how's that going? That's, yeah, you said regarding your services that there's ingrained nuclear safety culture, there's robust quality assurance, and impeccable safety record. But recently at San Onofre, the removal of the fuel was suspended, and there was an NIC special inspection, and they found that there was a failure to provide redundant drop protection. There was a failure to report this issue. It was a cover-up. Management failed to provide adequate procedures, adequate training to support procedures, adequate oversight, and multiple failed barriers. That's Holtec right now in California at San Onofre. And we know at Entergy, the reason they're still in column 4, the worst nuclear reactor in the United States, is because they have a problem adhering procedural and use adherence. And so you're talking about all these procedures that need to be followed. Well, Entergy is at the bottom of the pile for following procedures. And that's implicating the safety concerns that we have in the public. But you mentioned that there's no mechanism for cracking of these casks and no pathway for radiation streaming? So you're sure of that these can't crack and they can't release radiation? You said that in your talk. Yes. Right, right. It cannot crack, and there would be no pathway for radiation, period. Right, right. It cannot crack. Right, that's what you said? Yeah, okay. It seems like you're confident that something isn't going to happen. Now, I just have one question. You've got helium and heat together? You have helium in the cask, in the canister, right? And then you have a lot of heat. Okay. How's the impact? How's that? What does the helium do? It blocks the heat? Okay. Okay. Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Diane?
Okay, yes, okay.
That's
All right, so my question is,
Yep.
you had a failure to provide redundant drop protection at San Onofre, and the NRC halted your transfer of waste. Will you have redundant drop protection here at Pilgrim if you do end up purchasing Pilgrim?
Thank you, Diane. You can answer the question.
Yes, most certainly. Yes, most certainly.
You will? Yeah, Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
What's your warranty?
Who's next? Jim, have at it. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get you the, next, I'll get you. No, come on, Jim.
Jim Lampert. I have two questions for Holtec and two for Becky on the interagency. Let me first ask the Holtec questions, and let me just ask the questions, and then they can give me, then I'll ask those, and then they can give me answers.
Okay.
Holtec questions, these have to do with the PSDAR. PSDAR said that you are excluding the escalation of future decommissioning costs over the development period. However, as you probably saw, there was an NEI report three days ago that said, nuclear energy report 3 days ago, that noted that decommissioning costs have increased 60% over the last decade. The NRC's questions and answers, frequently asked, and I checked it today, said that costs will go up considerably higher than inflation, and gave a figure that works out to 5 to 7% annually. What I would like Holtec to do is explain to us why, given those, they did not include any escalation of decommissioning costs. And the second question has to do with your cash flow analysis that goes throughout. The cash flow analysis shows that you have 0.3% of what you started with left at the end. That is clearly not a profit. My question is, where is Holtec going to obtain its profit that I would expect its required profit is well north of 25%? Is it buried in the estimated costs? Is it included in the estimated costs, or where? My question for the interagency is really twofold, but it's really one. How do they plan to communicate with the public? And I mean the real public, not just the people who are sitting around the table here. I looked at the definition of a public body, and it appears to me that they fall within that definition. So are you planning to communicate with the public, and what is your view as to whether you're subject to the open meeting law?
Thank you, Jim. Let's start with Holtec's answers. Chris?
So on the first one, the NRC has a prescribed formula for how you actually do the analysis. It requires us to model a 2% real rate of return. So therefore, the escalation is not built in, but neither is the rate of return on the trust fund over and above 2%. So both of those are excluded from the overall analysis because we're adhering to NRC regulation in terms of how we approach that. The second question, Jim, sorry.
The second question is that I assume Holtec does make a profit here.
Absolutely.
And the question is, where is this profit going to come through? Because I can't find it in any of the PSDAR unless it's part of the estimated cost.
So we're not required to disclose the profit items. We are required to build it into the overall cash flow analysis and prove to the NRC that there is sufficient money in the decommissioning trust fund to actually achieve the decommissioning at the end of the day.
So is the answer then that it's included in the cost estimate?
Yes.
Becky, do you or Gary, who wants to answer?
So in answer to the first question on communication with the general public, the Interagency Working Group was formed at the behest of the governor's office, and I think in terms of communication to the general public, as we come to decisions and produce documents, those things would filter through the official communication channels of both the Secretariat and the governor's office.
In other words, no useful communication.
You'll get your time.
How do
How do I give the group? We have analyzed the PSDARs, we send them to the AG's office, et cetera.
Mhm.
How do we communicate with the working group?
I would be happy to share my email address and you can send it to me.
Okay, great, that's what we're looking for.
Okay.
You have no idea, Becky, what you've done. You have no idea.
Sean, I get 600 emails a day. Happy to take a few more.
I would have thrown David under the bus again.
I think we consider this group, and especially the folks that attend this regularly, to be a special stakeholder group. So I would anticipate communication with this group to be obviously more frequent than sort of the general public who is not as involved or affected as you are. Sure. So if we're sharing it with a wide distribution group, it would probably be our secretariat email. But I'm happy to do that. I review all of those correspondence. So.
We'll get a lot of very good information.
Second question is really related to the open meeting law. As I read the public body definition, it seems to include you, and public bodies are all subject to the open meeting law, and I just sort of what was your view on that? And they asked the Attorney General, for example, what his view.
My lawyers disagree with that reading of open meeting law and whether the Interagency Working Group is subject to it. I'm happy to share that analysis with you. However, I would hope that wouldn't be a barrier to communication back and forth.
I'd love the opportunity to discuss it with you, because obviously what I'm after is communication.
Right, and I think we can do that without having to dive into the details of open meeting law.
Or in the public records, which I
Thank you.
enjoy getting into.
Next, who's next? Henrietta?
Good evening, everybody. And thank you for being so patient and staying so long. I'll make it very brief. My name's Henrietta Cosentino, and I'm here tonight not just as a citizen, but I now represent the Nuclear Committee of the League of Women Voters in the Plymouth area. And the League has a lot of concerns about the health and welfare and ultimate safety of the Pilgrim site, which is obvious. We all have that concern. My question tonight is to follow up on the Holtec, on the canister, Holtec canister front. I am very concerned about what's happened at San Onofre, and I don't really understand the difference between the canisters that you described very wonderfully tonight and the ones in San Onofre. I don't know if you're all aware of what's going on at San Onofre on the panel, but on August 3rd, they were in the process of transferring a Holtec canister onto the ISFI pad, and it was wobbling as it went towards the guidance ring, an O-ring, and apparently it dangled and almost dropped 18 feet, and it was a moment of great panic, which was the cover-up that Diane referred to. And on further inspection, when this came out, when the NRC found out about it, they discovered that canister was cracked, that the steel was cracked on the outside, and that I think something like 17 other canisters were cracked. So my question is, what is the difference between those canisters and these ones?
Thank you, Henrietta.
Let me just clarify. You said that the canister was cracked. The canister was scratched. Okay. Yeah. Because that's an important difference. Yes. Yes. This was an event that happened at San Onofre. There was the question about that before. The loading was not halted by the NRC. It was halted by San Onofre and by us. To find out what actually happened and to evaluate what went wrong, and to basically put everything into place to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We take these things very seriously. It's not the only loading that we do. I think this year we loaded a total of, what was it, 170?
170 systems loaded, 135 of those by us.
170 systems of our systems have been loaded. We're doing that on a regular basis. This was a very unfortunate event. It shouldn't have happened. We are analyzing that, and we halted as I said, the loading of further cars until we and committed songs. SE has committed to the NRC that everything would be done to ensure that something would not happen again, and only then will once the NRC in the end is satisfied with that we're satisfied that we all do this, then they will basically give the okay that the loading will continue.
My question was, what is the difference between those canisters?
The canisters, they are almost identical. The one at San Onofre is just a slightly larger than here. But the difference is that the ring that actually the canister hung up on is not part of the above ground system. That was a shielding ring that was introduced into the system, which is a below ground system at San Onofre. It was introduced there to reduce the dose rates to the public and to the workers, and it turned out that it was obviously tighter than it should have been, and there's nothing similar in the system that is being used here at Pilgrim.
Thank you.
Doctor?
No.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Doctor, Henrietta said that the canister was cracked. Was there a crack in any canisters?
No, it was scratched.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
It was scratched. Yeah.
Okay. No. What might be helpful, Doctor and Joy, is if you want to provide some additional clarification, we'll get it up on the website. And Henrietta, if you want to just send me an email, when I get it, I'll send it to you. Next one, no follow-up yet, Diane. We're trying to get to everybody that wanted to ask. Mary, why don't we go with you tonight, and then Rich will go with you.
Mary Lampert from Duxbury. First question's to Holtec. Again, it would be important for you to be a little more thorough in your answers. For example, you gave the impression that there really wasn't a chance of a crack, and these, in fact, are being inspected. The truth of the matter, I understand, is that robotic technology that you talked about is not capable to do a full scan of the canister, number one. Number two, the NRC requirement is only to inspect one out of the 62 every 5 years. And they're all being stored in the same place, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to necessarily get the important one that may have a problem. Then you talked about, well, what if there is a crack? The response, the mitigation would be the Russian doll technique, that you would put it into a larger canister. But inside is a cracked canister, which you can't ship. And so does that mean we wind up keeping a collection of Russian dolls forever? Number one. Number two, and that's a serious question. Number two, the assumption in the PSDARs is that the fuel will be gone by 2062. And we have heard different dates, 1998, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The prudent measure would be to have a plan spelt with money. If it doesn't occur, if they don't leave at 2062, then what? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to do this? Also, you mentioned conveniently that 100 years you felt that the canisters would maintain their integrity, which coincides with the NRC's recent rule on casks, on spent fuel, that says every 100 years the casks have to be reclothed, they have to be put in new casks, and there has to be a new pad every 100 years. Where's the money? I didn't see it in the PSDAR.
So let's,
So the questions are,
Yep.
we heard they cannot crack. That obviously isn't true. There were salt deposits at San Diablo. There have been scratches, precursors of corrosion. So we know it can happen, but I keep on looking at that PSDAR, and I say, where's the money?
which question do you want them to respond to, Mary?
Where's the money?
Okay. Good. Joy, Dr. Anton, Chris? Looks like they pulled the string. Thank you, Mary.
Here, because then I have another question.
No, you're out of
Your
time.
time's up.
Unless somebody wants to yield the time. Yeah. Unless somebody wants to yield, they can always yield their time to you.
So I think Mary raises an interesting point, right, which is U.S. policy related to spent fuel is the U.S. government ultimately is obligated to take the fuel at some point. That point should have been in 1998, a date that they missed, and at this point in time, virtually all of the utilities are suing the U.S. government for breach of contract relative to that, and that's where the money comes from. Okay?
Us.
Well,
We're the taxpayer, right?
I'm a taxpayer as well, so you're right. It comes from us.
Okay.
Until there's a final solution for the fuel, the money will continue to come from us.
Thank you. Janet, you want to go next, and Rich, you'll wrap it up.
That you have to spend the money first before the DOE, usually 80%. So where's the money?
All right, thanks. Diane? Yeah, Janet, rather?
Lane Dickinson, Harwich, Cape Cod, Cape Down Windows. I'll make it quick. What happened out in San Onofre wasn't reported initially, and it was a reportable incident. From what I read, it was a whistleblower a few months later. How trustworthy is Holtec? And what would happen if the thing did drop? 2 questions.
I can help out with the first one. The reporting responsibilities were not Holtec's, they were the licensees.
Thank you.
I can handle the second one. The canister is analyzed and was even before that analyzed for such drops. And the analysis they show, and they have been reviewed by the NRC, that even if the canister would have dropped, it would have not been breached. So that's the answer to the second question, that was actually investigated.
Richard?
Richard Rothstein, Town of Plymouth, host community representative, finally getting to the table. Thank you. I have a comment and a question to the Holtec CDI representatives, and then to our Interagency Working Group representatives. Help me out here a little bit, but I'm assuming that the license transfer and NRC approval and sale of the facility and IFC to Holtec or CDI will take place. So, Holtec, okay. So with that premise, in listening to the discussion earlier and questions from the panel and public about warranties and what happens here and there, whatever, my impression is that CDI, Holtec is the prime entity of the CDI group in terms of having the largest impact. So that being the case, if there's a leak in the canister, let's say 30 years from now, whatever, Entergy's out of the picture. So if it has to get fixed, it's going to get fixed. It'll come out of Holtec's pockets. That would be my understanding. And then 100-year design life. So after 100 years, if at that point, even if the canister is still intact or determined to be intact, it could still be used if the NRC were to say, hey, you know, it looks, you could still go on beyond there. I'm assuming, though, that Holtec is an innovative company from everything I heard, and that you're looking also at the next generation of canisters, assuming that if spent nuclear fuel had to stay at some of the host community sites up to 300 years per the NRC's current regulations. But is my understanding correct as far as my connecting some dots there?
You're absolutely right.
So let me just say, so the warranty issue might be kind of a moot thing then?
It's Holtec's responsibility to manage the spent fuel that Holtec will own.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question, Rich? You have 20 seconds left.
Okay. Regarding the Interagency Working Group, I haven't had a chance to see the RFR that was posted, but my understanding is that a consultant will be hired. They're going to develop MOUs on behalf of the Commonwealth and hopefully the host communities and surroundings, and that the working group is hoping that the panel be able to provide some insight and advice regarding the PSDARs. I would hope, this is more of a comment, I would hope that given that this panel has some serious experts in certain disciplines, as well as the public too, sitting out here in certain areas, that the Interagency Working Group would involve the folks in this room regarding reviewing any draft MOUs. I realize that some of this might be confidential at the start, but before everything is cast in concrete, that we have an opportunity to advise, review and advise in that regard. So, thank you.
Thank you. There are no other questions that I saw. Is there any new business? No. Hearing none, I just want to give you one brief heads up. I've been in conversations with the NRC, they've called, and they are tentatively, and it's very tentatively at this point, trying to schedule a meeting here in Plymouth for the January 15th, the day before our next scheduled meeting, to come up for a public hearing on the documents that have been filed by Intergena Holtec. When I get a confirmation of that, I'll send it all out to you. In the conversations, I'm trying to also coordinate them appearing with us and joining us the evening following that. I've tried to convince them that mid-January in Plymouth is a lovely spot to be traveling to, and that they should think about staying for the weekend. But I will give you an update on that as soon as I do hear anything. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So when's the next meeting?
That's a good point before we do it. In my email to all of you, we could not get what would appear to be a quorum for the December meeting, and we could not get a facility here. So the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, January 16th.
January 15th?
16th. The NRC may be in town on the 15th.
Probably see it on the Cape.
Do I hear that motion to adjourn?
Just hang out.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
After this
Thank
meeting,
you all
we'll be
very
here.
much for attending.
Take care, Jack.